It's time for Supply Chain Now, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Heard around the world, Supply Chain Now spotlights the best in all things supply chain, the people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good morning. Scott Luton and team with you here at Supply Chain Now. Welcome back to today's show. We have got a very special episode teed up today. This is our 400th episode. Holy cow. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Woo! All right. So we're going to change the conversation a bit. We're going to flip it inward, and we're going to really hear what our team members think, what their favorite episodes are, and why, as we celebrate this milestone in our journey here. Hey, quick programming note before we get started. If you enjoyed today's episode, which is a bit unique, be sure to check us out, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. Okay, so to our audience, we're going to move real fast today. We've got 5 team members on with us right now. We've got a couple other team members we're going to be reconnecting with this afternoon. And we're going to move fast and kind of get a sense of who everyone is, a little bit about themselves in a nutshell. We're going to find out what their favorite episode has been, and the trillion-dollar question, why? So we're going to start with Trisha Cordes. Trisha, good morning.
Good morning.
So you are dialed in from where?
I'm dialed in from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Cincinnati, home of Skyline Chili. And
Yep.
Cincinnati is such a cool city. All right. So you're our leadoff hitter today on our 400th episode, which is crazy. Trisha, tell us a little about yourself, including what you do here at Supply Chain Now.
Okay. So actually, just a little bit personally, like you said, I'm from Cincinnati. I've been married to my husband for 21 years. It's hard to believe. We know we're having fun because time flies. We have 2 boys, Carson and Caleb. They're 8 and 12, so they keep us very busy. I'm a swim mom, a basketball mom. We're always on the go. Corona's helped a little to slow us down and give us a little extra time. But personally, I'm always the one taking pictures. That's kind of my family name. Everyone's like, oh, she's got us covered. So, but we love being out enjoying nature and hiking and visiting the mountains and the beach whenever we can. As far as professionally, I actually knew at the age of probably about 6, which my siblings did not appreciate, that I wanted to be a teacher. And so I went to college to be a teacher and taught elementary for 20 years, including 1st, 3rd, and 4th graders. And in that season, it was awesome. Like, that was one of the best jobs ever. And I've made so many connections and relationships. Actually, I have 1st graders that even now are in college and married, and I still follow up and connect with. So that's really cool. But as I became a mom of my own, I was missing out on so much. That's when I kind of used my entrepreneurial spirit, and I started my own business, which is how I got connected with Supply Chain Now.
Awesome.
So about 4 years ago, I started my business as a virtual assistant. I was pretty much with the teaching mindset, like, if you'll teach me, I know I can do it. So, and it's changed and evolved over time. And now I mostly work with podcasts. And I was lucky to connect with Amanda on LinkedIn. And so that started our relationship that brought me here. Here, I do a couple different things. I help schedule and get everything organized and on the calendar. So if anyone's scheduling anything through email, they most likely talk to me. And we get everybody scheduled and make sure they have all the information they need and where they need to be and all that. My other main job is podcast production. And so that means getting together all the bios, any information we need, including graphics, just getting everything ready so we can get the podcast scheduled and out to all of the listeners.
That is a ton of work. And really appreciate what you do. When we publish, which is pretty unique for at least a big chunk of the podcast industry, we're publishing content Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturday, like today. So to have a real pro that knows how to publish and produce all these shows, and does it in such an outstanding professional manner. Huge help to the business. So really appreciate what you do, Trisha, and love your journey that you were sharing earlier. All right, so let's. What has been, as all these episodes hit your space, your desk, whatever. What's been your favorite episode that's really stuck out, and why?
So mine may be a bit unique. So I'm newer to the supply chain industry, and so as a teacher, I'm trying to learn as much as I can and absorb it as fast as I can, even though in our life, we actually live the supply chain because my husband is a branch manager for a pool distributor. So we kind of live it, but I didn't know a ton about it. So for me, it was episode 373, which was Amanda's actually first episode. And it was like the quick time out about Corona. And the reason for me is, I loved hearing everyone's perspective on where we kind of were at that time, because it was a bit of a challenge for me, especially at first. And that's why I really related to Amanda a lot, because we were in kind of the same situation. So I was used to working at home full time, just doing my own little thing while the kids are at school. And then Corona hit, and I was working full time at home, doing remote learning, refereeing, and giving snacks all day. So things kind of changed. So for me, it was just really that episode, like hearing kind of everyone's perspective and just really relating to Amanda and kind of seeing what's going on, knowing kind of that I wasn't like in this alone kind of. So that was definitely my favorite.
Love that. Wow, you've set a high bar on this first segment of our 400th episode, Trisha. And just like we thought, because you were a bit, you said you were getting out of your comfort zone by being on the show. I think you're a natural, Trisha. I mean, everybody else nod their head. She's really good. So thanks so much for taking some time out of your morning and joining us here today and sharing some of your perspective. So we really appreciate what you do and all what you've contributed to our journey. All right, so we're going to move right along from Trisha Cordes to Devin Riddle. So Devin, good morning. How you doing?
Hey, good morning, Scott. How are you?
Doing great. Your background, for folks that may be listening and not seeing, what a gorgeous fall morning that background. I think of picking apples and going out and looking at the foliage. What is that shot from?
Well, that's actually my beautiful campus in the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. I attend Southern Virginia University, and that's what I get to wake up to every single morning at that university. It's kind of nice, with the exception of when it snows. But then it's beautiful even with that.
All right.
But yeah.
So Devin, what's really interesting about you is you go coast to coast. Devin Riddle is coast to coast. He is an undergraduate at what school in Virginia?
Southern Virginia University.
Southern Virginia University. However, he is from the West Coast in Oregon, right, Devin?
Portland, Oregon. Born and raised.
Oregon. Okay. All right. So tell us more about yourself, including what you do here at Supply Chain Now.
Well, as I said, I attend Southern Virginia University, SVU, Go Knights, and I'm studying business with supply chain focus and a minor in computer science. I have a passion for reverse logistics. You'll understand why in a little bit. And I absolutely love working with people. I'm also a drummer. I play in my university's orchestra, and that's really fun. And I really much enjoy Spanish culture and studying that. I did that for about 2 years of my life, serving a mission for my church, learning Spanish, and now speaking it and using it in the industry. So it's pretty cool. And then, so at Supply Chain Now, man, this is such a great company to work for. I'm not even trying to just say something. It's amazing. Working with wonderful people that have great leadership skills that I can grow and be able to harness to develop myself professionally. It's wonderful. People like Scott and Greg, wow, they know their stuff. Whoa. Let me back up really quick. So I'm just an intern here, though, kind of the grunt worker in a way, but we're all kind of grunt workers as we had the discussion. I do the analytics as well as Instagram guru, I'd like to say. So if there's any posts on there you don't really like, it's probably my fault. but I'm trying to work every single day to do the best I can. But yeah, that's pretty much my responsibilities here at Supply Chain Now, and I love every single part of it and minute of it.
So all right. I wish we could dive into each of y'all for an hour or two, because there's so much fascinating backdrop behind each of y'all and your journeys and your passions in life and what have you. I got to challenge you, Devin. We got to delete that word "just." No one is just anything. And while technically you may be an intern, technically, all of you and Genoa, which we'll talk to it momentarily, bring so much to the team, and it's so important. We've learned so much from y'all. So no one is just anything, and I love all the passion and expertise you bring to the table. So, Devin, what has been one of your favorite episodes, and tell us why?
Okay, so not one of it's probably my favorite. Claudia Freed is by far my favorite guest that's ever been on Supply Chain Now. Specifically in episode 291, where she talked about like the reverse logistics portion of industries getting devices that are maybe have a flaw to it, and then refurbishing it and reselling it and using the funds which are given for scholarships for students. Come on now, you can't beat that. I listened to that and I was like, that's what I want to do. And taking a course, it really connected. Taking a course in my university of careers, the biggest issue of like people in industries is transitioning from industry to industry because they get burnt out and because they don't have a basis of what they feel is most important in the longevity period. And something like reverse logistics, like I had passion with, and just learning about that, it really would grow my mind to be able to be like, hey, I can do this for a long, long time. And man, Claudia is way smart. I listen to her episodes and I'm just like, man, that's what I want to be.
We got a lot of feedback around that episode. That episode was her first appearance was taped at the Reverse Logistics Association conference. Amanda and Greg and Vicky and I were all out there covering that. We probably knocked out 11, 12 interviews. And you're right, Devin. Claudia brings a lot to the table, and EAL Green, which is her business, her organization, is a very unique business dedicated to sustainability and the circular economy while doing great things, as you suggest, with some of the proceeds from that. So we're big fans of Claudia as well.
Like you should be.
So, all right. So, Devin, love what you bring to the table. Thanks so much for joining us here today and sharing one of your favorite episodes. We're going to have to get you a Claudia Freed t-shirt. Maybe that'll be in the hopper or something.
Thanks, Scott.
All right. So, moving right along, let's move over to Genoa Smith. Genoa, good morning.
Good morning.
All right,
so, everyone.
So glad to have you with us here today. We started in Cincinnati with Trisha, and then we went to the West Coast in Portland, Oregon with Devin, and now we're back on the East Coast. And Genoa, tell us where you're dialed in from.
So I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, specifically the Pikesville area. I am a rising senior supply chain management major at Morgan State University. I am also the incoming president of APICS, the Morgan State University chapter. One of my passions is modeling. So I'm also the Miss Fashion at Morgan State University. And specifically I do here at Supply Chain Now is I'm an intern focusing on outreach and networking.
Outstanding. And a ton of due diligence. Genoa's got a knack for building files on all types of research topics. So, and Genoa, I learned something new here today. I think we all did. You've got a passion for modeling. Did I hear you right?
Yes. So I have been modeling for about 2 years now. Last year I tried out for a modeling organization and actually ended up being accepted. And now I am the miss of the organization. So my job is to reach out to new models and get them to want to basically be in the organization and basically like the princess who does like all the community service work. So,
outstanding.
Yeah.
Well, who knows? Maybe there's also fashion supply chain in your future down the road a bit. But love what you do here. You bring a lot to the table. It was a pleasure meeting you for the first time out in Arizona as we were at the Diverse Manufacturing and Supply Chain Alliance event. Great event. Looking forward to reconnecting with David Burton next week. And we sat down and interviewed Genoa and several of her fellow students from Morgan State University, and just they were hitting home runs. It's amazing to see just how far these talented undergrad students are today, how far ahead they were, at least when I was in school. And, as I think I've shared with most of y'all, my head was on beer and pizza in college, and look at what Devin and Genoa are doing. So it's really nothing short of amazing. Okay, Genoa, what is one of your favorite episodes and why?
So my favorite episode is episode 363 with Latia Thomas for bias reasons, but I really enjoyed the episode because I feel like it gave us, who are still in undergrad, a voice, and that's really important, especially because we're trying to grow the major, especially here on the East Coast. It's really popular on the West Coast, but some schools on the East Coast, especially in Maryland, don't have a supply chain major. So just for people to hear from our standpoint and to actually hear that we're excited about it, it will help other people get excited about it. So that's why it's my favorite episode. Great
point. And we all know the challenge that the industry has in really competing for top talent like Devin and Genoa and getting them into industry. You know, supply chains competing for top talent, arguably like never before. So I love your thoughts there, Genoa. And for folks that may have missed that episode with Latia, Genoa, tell us about your connection with Latia.
So I actually met Latia when I changed my major to supply chain. I was actually an industrial engineering major at first, and I changed it to supply chain, and Latia was the first person to reach out to me in my classes, and she was kind of like, you got to get an APIX, you got to do this, you got to do that. And so she kind of became like my big sister in a way, and she really has helped me with everything supply chain. And she was the president last year, and I'm the president now.
Outstanding, Genoa. I love that. And now you're succeeding her as one of the leading APIC student chapters in the country, as kind of at the helm as president. So looking forward to kind of seeing the mark you leave on that organization. Of course, we're going to support you however we can. So thank you for joining us here this morning, Genoa, and thanks so much for what you do to contribute to our overall success here at Supply Chain Now.
Thank you.
Okay. Continuing right along, our next guest here is Chris Barnes, the legendary Chris Barnes, one of, Amanda, I don't know, we won't talk about this very much, but Chris was one of the first folks not named Luton that I met in Atlanta years ago. And it's such a pleasure to collaborate with great people and longtime friends, and that's what we do here at Supply Chain Now. So, Chris, tell us about, good morning, first off.
Good morning. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, you and I have been talking supply chain for a long time.
Is right. And most of it's been true. So, so tell us, Chris, it's tough to do it in a nutshell. I know that you've done a lot of things in your career and in your journey, but tell our listeners a little about yourself.
Well, thanks again, Scott. I'm actually a practitioner. So I'm out there doing supply chain stuff all the time, primarily on the outbound side, warehousing, logistics, transportation side. But for Supply Chain Now, I'm basically working in podcast editing. I used to think I was a producer until Trisha told me she was a producer. So I think she's my internal customer. So I have the opportunity to listen to all the good interviews that we have, the content, and kind of slice and dice and splice and do all that good stuff. So when you hear it, it's improved quality stuff. So I have great content to start with. That's the first thing. And then my other role is essentially finding companies or people that may be able to benefit from participating or being involved with Supply Chain Now. And if there's anyone out there that's interested in helping us reach episode 800, feel free to give me a shout, and we'll figure out how you can help us do that.
We might hit 800 next month at this pace.
Maybe so.
I don't know.
At this rate.
Well, hey,
but I know you're editor, so you got to take it easy on me.
Well, before we talk about one of your favorite episodes, tell us more about Supply Chain is Boring. That has really made a splash in the market.
Yeah, well, another thing I do, Scott, is I'm a teacher or a facilitator, edutainer, whatever you want to call it, more for adult learners, specifically around supply chain content. So I work with local universities and companies to help educate people and train them on supply chain concepts, whether they're interested in job transition or anything else. So that's really what my focus is kind of taking practical supply chain concepts and making them real to people's learning. And that's what I enjoy listening to some of this content here. So what we did is we started Supply Chain is Boring. So I'm the host on that chair. And what we do is we really try to find practical ways that people are using these concepts that we're talking about. So, some of Supply Chain Now talks about that, but what we do is we look at some of the historical perspective. For example, I talk to professors, I talk to people that started companies, 40, 50 years ago. So that's a fun piece of it for me.
Yeah. And I love the name. The name catches a lot of people. What'd you just say?
It is. It's so boring. And sometimes when I'm done with an episode, I say, man, that was really boring.
Yeah. I loved that, not to steal your thunder, but one of my favorite episodes you did was that 2-parter with Norman
Bodek.
Yes. Fascinating. Yeah. He's been there and done it 1,000 times. Really a legendary figure in industry. And he had some outstanding stories. And I love your style where, it's always about the guest and it's always about getting them to share, their experiences. It's never about the host. And I think we're kindred spirits in that regard. So, okay. Yeah. So Chris, tell us your one or two of your favorite episodes and why.
Well, thank you. Thank you for throwing that too in there, Scott. I appreciate that. It gives me a little flexibility to sell more. So I have about 399 favorite episodes. But, more from the recency effect, I'm going to go with Javier Diaz de Leon, Rick McDonald, and Jasmine Crowe from Gooder. Those were, it was 398, 393, and 390 specifically, if you're looking. Those were just, they're very, it's not really so much about the process as much as it is about leadership styles. It's the kind of giving back to the community. It's making things better, whether we're talking about pandemics or just understanding your people. The one with Javier really, really resonated because, the guy is so humble. He's a pretty powerful figure in global trade, in the Mexican economy and the Mexican government. And the guy is so humble. And you can just hear it in that interview. That was pretty neat. Rick McDonald, same thing. You're listening to what he's talking about. You're trying to make edits. And he starts talking about, frontline workers and he knows their names. That was pretty powerful stuff. That's leadership style. And then Jasmine with Gooder, that's just a fantastic cause. And she's really, put everything she has behind it to make it very, very powerful. My more locally, go ahead, Scott. You need to.
No, I agree with you. I think you picked 3 out. I mean, all of y'all are picking episodes and you're bringing back memories and how much I enjoy learning from all these folks. And the 3 you picked were really special.
Yeah, and another one more locally is The Buzz. I enjoy The Buzz. Specifically, the one, it was I think 389, where you talked about the history of the U.S. interstate system. That's as I travel, that's very boring. So it's right in my wheelhouse. But 40,000 miles of interstate, the amount of effort it took to get that done. I think how it's had such a tremendous impact on our economy, on the supply chain that we benefit from here in the United States. And so that was just an interesting topic. I studied the interstate system quite a bit because it is boring. My only sadness was that we should have made that an episode of Supply Chain is Boring. But just back to Genoa. If anybody knows that the Baltimore has one of the few interstates that don't go anywhere. So if you don't know what that means, they started building interstates. There was a lot of you talked about it in your podcast, Scott. There was a lot of neighborhood resistance to some. And they started building one through Baltimore. The neighborhoods came together and stopped it. So now there's about a mile stretch of interstate that doesn't go anywhere, but it's still there. And I've been on it. So that is really boring. And so, what I enjoy most, Scott, is, having a chance to listen to do the editing. It's a passion. It's a labor of love. But, what we are as an organization, Scott, it's, you try to be polished, you try to be professional and stuff, but we're a very real interviews. I mean, we're on there, Scott, and you see this all the time. Dogs barking in the background, kids coming up, pulling on daddy's pant leg, trucks in the background. That's who we are. So we're kind of a real life podcast, kind of right there, just showing you what's happening. That's one of the things I enjoy about it.
Wow. You shared a lot there that we should dive into and talk a lot more about, but personally, I am very proud of the authenticity that we are committed to here at Supply Chain Now. And whether that is the easy stuff to talk about or whether that's the very challenging stuff to talk about, which there's plenty. And if you don't talk about it and dive into it and engage in the topics, nothing changes. So I appreciate a lot of what you shared there, Chris, and always a pleasure, and looking forward to a lot more great content with Supply Chain is Boring. And of course, we appreciate all of your efforts at keeping those episodes rolling out every day, Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturday.
Thank you.
All right, man. Amanda, we should have blocked more time. We're going to bring in Amanda Luton, not only my wife, but equally as important, our Chief Marketing Officer here at Supply Chain Now. Couldn't be here unless Amanda has done all that she's done through the years. Amanda, good morning.
Good morning. I'm excited to be back on. I don't know if my head's going to fit in the screen though after Trisha was talking about my that was sweet.
We waited too long. In fact, we waited too long to get all of y'all on the show.
Right.
We do have an episode coming up where we're going to dive in deeper with Devin and Genoa and Clay Phillips, who's not here right now with us. But they really hear their take and perspective on the market. And we waited too long to get Amanda on there. That episode that Trisha Cordes was talking about, that was a great timeout, interesting episode. All right. So Amanda, for folks that may have missed that, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and of course what you do here at Supply Chain Now.
Yeah. So I'm Amanda. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Supply Chain Now. I have been working in marketing for what was my minor in college? So many years I can barely think back. But I majored in fashion merchandising and a minor in marketing, and it turns out that marketing has taken me a bit further. But so I had my own business, Magnolia Marketing Group, that has kind of morphed and changed, and the experience that I took from Magnolia Marketing, I've put into Supply Chain Now. So I manage and I organize the marketing efforts for Supply Chain Now. And as you can tell, I work with a very, very talented team, bright marketing minds, and we work together, to keep the Supply Chain Now engine firing on all cylinders and running as smoothly as possible. I'm also married to the CEO, which is a job in itself, but I wouldn't have it any other way. We work together and we work together pretty well, I think. So that's what I do.
That is, you did a good job. That is really in a nutshell. But you are absolutely right on so many different fronts. I mean, the talent and the different way that all these folks that are in the picture right here, Trisha and Chris and Devin and Genoa, and of course, Greg and Clay and several other folks that work with us in a variety of different ways, man, what they bring to the table from different perspectives is so critically important to why we're here today celebrating, episode 400, whether it's story ideas or visibility and marketing ideas of how we position different content, make sure we're reaching different aspects of the global audience. I mean, all the different ideas and equally as important, if not more important, action that these folks bring to the table. So, all right. So not to steal your thunder here, Amanda, but let's talk about your favorite episode or two, and of course, why.
So I've been around, I'm one of the few that's been around for all 400 episodes. So of course I couldn't narrow it down to just one, but I wanted to talk about just kind of a couple of topics that I like. And I do have one that's one of my very favorites. But my favorite episodes are ones where the guests have a lot of passion for supply chain. You can tell by the way that they're speaking about their jobs. You can tell in videos how excited they get about supply chain, which, I don't come from a supply chain background. I'm not a practitioner. I was never involved in the supply chain industry. So, for a long time, not only did I not even know what supply chain was, but Chris, I thought it was pretty boring, right? I didn't know much about it. I've learned so much, through the years and listening to people, and supply chain is something that they really have a passion for. So I love the guests that come on our show with a lot of passion. Most recently, Radu Palamario, the pronunciation is a little iffy there for me. He was on a live stream and then we produced it into an episode, but he was so passionate about supply chain talent. You could hear it in his voice. You could see it as he was speaking, through the live stream. And I mean, he was preaching, he was converting the audience, and it was so interesting to watch, and it was so fun to watch. I also love the interviews with women of supply chain. some of my very favorites, Claudia Freed. Devin, I'm right with you. I think she is so inspiring. And one of my good friends, Elba Pareja Gallagher, she has such a mission, and she is working so hard, not only in supply chain, but also in her organization, Show Me 50, which is working to create equality and give women a better chance in C-level positions and leadership within organizations. But just hearing their generous nature and their female perspective, I think is so important. And speaking of important, we had an episode, it was a Veteran Voices episode with two female vets that are great leaders, very successful. And, I think rather unexpectedly on our end and on their end, on the episode that they were on, they ended up sharing their experience with sexual assaults while they were on active duty. I remember listening to that episode. I was live tweeting it actually, and it was bringing me to tears because it was such an important story that needed to be told, and it was there, and they were, it was just so moving, and they were sharing just their ability to take those experiences and overcome hardships and become real change makers and leaders in their industry. And it was so inspiring. And I think a lot of women in supply chain need to hear the voices of other women in supply chain. And kind of like Trisha said earlier, just to know that they're not alone and they're struggling with the same issues that they are. I also like interviews. Of course, like I said before, I don't have a supply chain background. So I like interviews with veteran supply chain practitioners that can break down these complex concepts with great ease and make it very easy to understand for people that just don't know what reverse logistics means, don't know what blockchain is, all these things. They can break it down and make these concepts, much easier to understand. I love when Mike Griswold comes on the show because he has a brain for supply chain, but he knows it so well, I think, that he can make the most complex issues or situations or concepts just seem very simple. He breaks it down and knows how to explain it to people.
Yep.
I like Trish Beam from Home Depot, who, Devin, kind of like you said earlier, I find reverse logistics very interesting because I have a retail background. So, seeing how returns impact the supply chain, and, I had never thought before about when I ordered 10 bathing suits from Amazon, just to keep 2 of them and then return the other 8 that won't fit, how that impacts the supply chain. Get myself in trouble maybe. But I think that those are very interesting when we hear those practitioners come on the show and they can break it down really simply. But I will get down to my favorite. If I had to pinpoint one, it was episode 194 with Karan Agrawal. He's a senior strategy analyst at Dell, works on their operations and supply chain strategy. He's a Georgia Tech grad that had founded their Apex Supply Chain Club. And in the episode, he's explaining why millennials are perfect for supply chain and how to successfully start your career in supply chain. But in this episode, he has this youthful optimism that it doesn't come across as naive, but just a modern perspective on supply chain that was just so refreshing. And up until that point, I had not heard a perspective like that before about supply chain. It really gave me hope for the future. He gave great advice and he had great enthusiasm for what he was doing. Again, he had this great passion for supply chain. And I can't imagine anybody that listened to that episode not feeling refreshed and rejuvenated about their career, or not wanting to get into supply chain, or give it a thought, at least if they had not thought about supply chain as a career before. But he just got you really pumped up and excited about supply chain and made you realize that it really is not boring. It's exciting and it can be fun for somebody coming right out of college. It's a great industry to go into. It gave me hope for the future and for supply chain, for industry in general, and refuted the stereotype that millennials are lazy and entitled and whiny. This guy is making it happen. And being an old millennial myself, like the oldest millennial you can possibly, I was proud to have him representing the millennial generation. I'm like, see guys, like millennials can make it happen. They can be very impactful. But in over 400 episodes, we've been so blessed by just dozens and dozens of amazing leaders, incredible stories. And I'm just happy that we have been able to share their wisdom and share their experiences with our audience. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but I just couldn't narrow it down.
I loved each of those episodes, and I've really enjoyed each of you sharing. We all have a personal connection with these conversations that we're part of, and to hear each of y'all share different ones that struck a certain way with you really takes me back, and I can almost remember the days and where we were and what else was going through my mind as we were processing these incredible stories that folks share. And it reminds me exactly why we're doing what we're doing. It is a passion, and to each of y'all which have touched on it in some way, shape, or form, these are stories that need to be told. It's views that need to be shared. It's a platform that has to be built, and because we're conveying these messages and these best practices and these experiences, and in these mistakes, we learn equally as much from mistakes as we do from the wins and everything else. So I want to share a few of mine, and but for me, it's more about this. Well, all of us have talked about the stories. That's what resonates with us, right? Storytelling is so important these days, especially in this information overload, right? We've got so much coming at us. In the passionate stories. I mean, for me, Stacy Watson from the Georgia Ports Authority, he talked about dirt, trees, and chickens. And that was kind of the theme of that show, because those are the major exports that the Georgia ports, sends out that fills so many ships. Peggy Gulick from AGCO talked about real practical innovation, as well as being a female leader, kind of her journey and some of the things she's learned in particular. Don't be afraid if you don't have all the skills in a new position, and don't be afraid to say no, because every opportunity is not the right opportunity. Love Peggy. We got to get her back on. The students has been one of my favorite highlights. Devin and Genoa working with and rubbing elbows and learning from these incredibly bright minds that have a different take on the important stuff, not just in supply chain, but in business and frankly in life. Morgan State University, UGA here locally, Georgia Tech, of course, Bradley University, Chris's alma mater. They won a case competition a year or two ago. We interviewed them. That was a pleasure. The university, we spent time in Birmingham with the University of Alabama at Birmingham. That was a highlight for me, where Greg and I were there local. And, on that note, really missing, I love this. I love the Zoom calls, but being in studio with folks and really that camaraderie and kindred spirits that it really is irreplaceable as folks are sharing what's really important to them. That's next to impossible to replicate. So I'm really looking forward to being back, whether it's a new studio at Point A or really some new space over at King Plow with the Vector Global Logistics team. Sheila Sitzer with Panera, their hiring policy. Anyone remember what that was? No jerks allowed. And it's just simple. It cuts straight to, what we're all probably thinking. Who's got time to work with jerks? No one does, right? Life's too short. Sherika Sanders, PhD, was an outstanding episode. She was a 2017 Hidden Figure of Dallas, and her journey and her approach to, always constantly putting an eye on giving back. That was a very special episode, and one of the early full access episodes we had. And Amanda, you touched on it. I wasn't sure if any of y'all were going to share it, but as exciting and as rewarding as it is to embrace all the great, uplifting, enlightening, positive stories, the challenging stories are we've got to talk about. We've got to lean into and engage. And to hear two strong women, female leaders, unexpectedly share about sexual assault on active duty, that was heartbreaking. But it was also a learning moment, I think, hopefully not just for me, but a lot of folks. And we're seeing a lot of that play out, thankfully, in the news now, and hopefully get a lot better for folks currently serving, because that change is so important. So all of these stories, all of what y'all have shared. You've made our weekend, you've made our week, you've made our month. We couldn't be here publishing episode 400 without each of you. So big thanks to Trisha and Chris and Devin and Genoa, and of course Amanda, because Amanda does have some stress probably from me to do with behind the scenes, and we couldn't be here without all of her good work and support. Of course, a big thanks to our audience. We wouldn't be here. I mean, our audience is why we do what we do. We take very seriously the mission to give voice to industry, give voice to global supply chain. So to our audience, let us know, how can we help you? How can we serve you better? What do you want to learn more about? Chris?
Yeah, if I can just throw a challenge out to our audience that's listening or will be listening, specifically to the college students. And I thought about it when Amanda mentioned the interview with Agrawal. There were two things that she referenced it in that interview, one thing that he did, and Genoa referenced it in her conversation. I'm not going to say what it is, but it's an indicator of success, and which tells me Genoa is going to be successful just like Agrawal is. If you think you know what it is, send me a note and I'll tell you.
I love that. I love that little surprise challenge to our audience.
There's a secret to success there.
Chris, and by the way, if you can't tell, Chris doesn't miss anything. He's one of the most observant folks I've ever met. But yeah, I love, really appreciative of all the efforts, really appreciative of course, all of our sponsors and contributors, in particular, Enrique Alvarez at Vector Global Logistics, early just believer and embracer, if that's a word, of this mission we're on and what we're committed to. So really appreciate his continual partnership. And on that note, now it is Greg White's turn to weigh in. You've heard from the rest of the team, and now one of my regular co-hosts, if ongoing since a trip to Birmingham, Alabama, Greg, feels like ages ago.
It does, doesn't it?
But we've probably co-hosted some 200 or so episodes easily since then. I think closer to 250, 300 by my count.
I don't remember what episode number that was, but spoiler alert, that's one of my favorites.
Well, all right. So before we get into your favorites, and before you give us your 2 thumbs up episodes, tell our audience if they had their head in a hole for the last 18 months. Tell us about yourself, Greg, and what you do here at Supply Chain Now.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Greg, obviously, and I'm a host, principal, and big fan of the show. I am the one who changes his hair the most of the whole company, probably. And I mean, I guess my job is really to do what you see me doing every day. It's to bring you the information, the news, to extract information from all these talented people that we get to share time with, and listen, share, argue just a little bit sometimes, and kind of evaluate. And as Scott loves to do, give the hot takes on, the kind of the takeaways of what people have been talking about on the show. And I got to tell you, it is a, I don't know, it's a cool experience. It's great to be able to do this, right? And really enjoy meeting people and learning a lot.
Yep.
So
we're very fortunate.
Is that what I do, Scott? I think that's
about
what I do.
The only thing I would add is, your advisory role. You brought a lot of big picture thinking to our business and organization. It's what you have been doing for years with a bunch of different companies, still do.
Yeah. And
that has shaped our trajectory in many different ways. It got us thinking differently about the business and the industry. So, I would
radio. That's our biggest accomplishment. That might be our biggest accomplishment, is dropping radio, right?
That is right. And what Greg's referring to our audience is we drop, Supply Chain Now radio is what we were the first, couple years. And in the last 6 months or so, we have taken a variety of steps kind of under the radar to drop radio, since it harkens back to, the rearview mirror and years gone past. and we've dropped it, and we're just about to change to supplychainnow.com.
Right.
The URL is like the final vestige that's been tough to
that
shift.
Was an accomplishment in and of itself. As big as 400 episodes was getting that URL, wasn't it? I mean, that was an impressive feat. Basically, I got to tell the story. You can't stop me. Basically, Clay, the dog, and Amanda, our chief marketing officer, and Scott's lovely wife, camped on this URL. And the moment that it came up available, the moment that the current owner, who wasn't really using it, didn't pay for it, they jumped all over it and scored it for us. And it's the culmination of what we've been trying to accomplish, right? Digital killed the radio star. So we wanted to, as important as what Scott talked about, 4 words was a lot for people. We were Supply Chain Radio, Supply Chain Now Radio, Supply Chain Radio Now. We were everything but Supply Chain Now Radio. It's even hard for me to remember that now.
It was also very limiting, especially as in this last year, we really dove headfirst into all things video. For the first
point.
Probably,
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that. Right.
250 episodes, 300 or so episodes, with a few exceptions. It was all an audio podcast. And of course, at our core, the audio podcast channels that we've developed over the years, and those subscribers and that audience is near and dear to our heart. And we're not going anywhere.
And everything still goes out as a podcast, right? It just might also go out as video, which people love. It's super engaging. You get to meet the people that you're hearing from. And that's right. That's been a great dynamic for us. So yeah, I guess that's pretty funny that I didn't even think about the fact that radio would not have gone good with all this video.
Okay. So now that our not only has our audience gotten a chance to put their finger on the pulse with Greg, but our audience has kind of seen behind the scenes some of our conversations.
How we make the sausage.
That's right. So let's move over to, I still, man, just 400 episodes, it just still seems, has it been that long? I keep asking myself.
Well,
have we had
it
that
hasn't
many?
been that long, by the way. I mean, you started this in 2017, right?
Right.
But really, the episodes started coming fast and furious in 2019.
Right.
So have you shared with folks on this session kind of how the progression went?
Tell
them a little bit about 17, 18, and 19. How
we didn't. So earlier on this show, the 400th episode, our audience heard from Amanda and Trisha and Chris and Devin and Genoa. And we all kind of focused on what they did in the business and their favorite episodes. We didn't touch on what you're asking about, which is kind of how things have evolved. 8 total podcasts, all of 2017. And then I think in 2019 alone, we did some 200 episodes, which is crazy. Yeah. We did touch earlier on the show how we're a bit unique for a big chunk of industry where, rather than doing a weekly show or a monthly show, which is nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
We are publishing content Monday through Friday, sometimes Saturday. And it really, we do that because covering global supply chain, I mean, even going to bed at night, you're going to miss 12 stories across the scope. That is massive scope. That is global supply chain. So anyway, but what else would you add to that?
So 7, evolution? I think 28 in 2018 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was 28 or 38, something like that. And then a couple hundred in 2019. And we'll probably do, what do you think, Scott? 300?
That's a great question. I'm not sure what we'll do in 2020, but one of the big changes in our business is, the launch of these new shows, new series, much like Tequila Sunrise, which Greg has created, much like Tech Talk that we'll be launching with Corinne Bursa in the weeks and months to come, much like Supply Chain is Boring, which we touched on earlier, right?
I love that.
And
I mean, seriously, if there ever wasn't a more ironic title for for a show, I can't imagine what it is. Right.
And, we're trying to diversify programming, diversify, some folks that love Tequila Sunrise may not care for my trivia-minded This Week in Business History, and that's perfectly fine. We expect it. So creating these different channels will probably at some point, maybe not in this month or next month, but at some point it will certainly add a lot more depth to just the sheer amount of content we're producing. So,
well, it'll give folks the opportunity to kind of peel off into the topics that really resonate with them, right? And if there's anything that I feel like we're really good at, I'm not bragging on me, everybody. I'm bragging on Scott mostly, but I want to say we. But if there's anything that we're good at, it is in constantly polling and engaging and assessing with our audience and our followers to figure out what they want and to deliver some of what they want. I've gotten some great feedback on Tequila Sunrise. We've only done 3 episodes. So, and we continue to refine that. As I said, I think in a post somewhere, I said, somebody said, when do you think you'll be done refining this episode? And I said, I won't be satisfied till it's Tears of Llorona, which is about $350 a bottle. Tequila.
Yikes.
So,
all right.
So we're going to continue to distill it.
That's right. And that's our North Star, our audience and what they want and how we can best serve them. That is what drives this business. That's our commitment. And we touched on that earlier. So Greg, now I'd love to get you to weigh in on some of your, favorite segments, favorite shows, favorite conversations from 400 episodes.
Yeah. So, well, I tipped my hand a little bit earlier. I got to say, one of my favorite episodes was the very first one I did at UAB, University of Alabama, Birmingham, where Scott and I, we were just kind of talking about advisory, and we had been on Logistics Summit executive board together. We're kind of talking about, hey, do you think you'd want to do this? And he mentioned on a phone call, I'm going to Birmingham tomorrow. It was tomorrow. It was the next day, right? I'm going to Birmingham tomorrow, and I'm, it's 5 people, it's several shows, and yada yada yada. And he goes, it's a handful for one person. And I said, I'll play. Can I play? I think we were both equally astounded at that point. I mean, Scott was like, well, yeah, come on. And I went, did I just say that out loud? But it was great. Wow. The people were so gracious and so talented. And we had such great Mediterranean food right across the street from UAB campus. And we had a great time talking to folks on air and after the fact. And what I learned in that moment was that you can learn so much. I've been in supply chain for a lot of years, as I limit it to no more than 2 decades. But I learned so much in that one episode, and it just, I don't know, it just made me more hungry for more learning. So that one, I don't know if it's my favorite, and this list is going to be long, but it was way up there. Being a guest on the show was very cool. So I was a guest before I was a principal. And when I was the CEO of Blue Ridge, I was on the show 2 or 3 times, right? Once, or I think, was it 2 or 3?
That sounds about right.
Yeah. Well, once was, oh my gosh.
Once we had you and Albert Sorto together.
Yeah.
And Albert at the time was with the NMTA. And then you made a follow-up appearance on our Leadership Matters show series.
With Will.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think I might have been on one show that Elba Perea Gallagher was
I think you're right. And, of course, a webinar. So, you were, now that I think about it, multiple appearances.
Wow. I didn't know. Yeah. Anyway, that was fun. It's a great experience. And that leads me to one of my other, I'm going to have to go with favorite moments, Scott. I can't pick an episode. There is, for me, I think for us, because we're on them, there is an aha moment. There is a pivotal moment. There is a clutch catchphrase in virtually every one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I would have to go next with some of my favorite moments are when the lights go out, the cameras go off, the mics are off, and somebody says, "Man, you guys made that so easy." That is so gratifying, because that's what we want. We want people to be able to deliver their true selves. I'm pretty excited, man. I can't even talk.
That's a good point. But it's kind of counterintuitive in this world of constant digital exposure that you would think so many folks that get interviewed, it kind of is just, it goes with where we are in 2020. However, the opposite is still true. A lot of folks, most folks, I do occasionally, you get anxious, you get nervous because, you've got to weigh in. You're about to tell your story. You're about to open up, who you are a little bit. Yeah. Put some cards on the table. And that makes a lot of folks anxious. So to your point, Greg, I agree. That's some of the most rewarding feedback that we are fortunate to receive about putting people at peace and at ease and just getting them to be more comfortable opening up.
And think about how far we have come in the just over 12 months, 15 months or so, that you and I have been working together. I mean, 15 months ago, you had to still explain to people what supply chain was.
That's right.
15 months ago, we used to say things like supply chain now has a seat at the table, but it was really still a bit of a seat at the kiddie table. And now it's near the head of the table.
Sure.
Right? It really is. I mean, supply chain is the identity, or is the core identity for so much of a company or an initiative. So a recent episode that we did, Jenny Froome and
Dominique
Twinkles. Yeah. Right. Yep. From, oh my God, I'm sorry. Jenny's
people
from
people that deliver
right, in Africa. And Dominique's statement was no product, no program. And that is so true for retail or distribution or, or chemical or industrial or whatever. No product, no program. And people are realizing that after the great toilet paper shortage of 2020. They are realizing that supply chain is in the forefront, not only from a visibility of product standpoint, but also from expressing your sustainability or expressing your commitment to equality or your commitment to fair trade, right? I'm a hawk on this slavery topic.
Yes.
So your supply chain and everyone in it represents your brand, and you have to be completely aware of that. So that's how far we've come in just over a year.
Yep. I got a quick bulletin from our friend Malcolm. I got Dominique's last name wrong. It's Dominique Zwinkels with
right.
People That Deliver. And she and that organization have a fascinating story behind them. One of my favorite episodes too.
I did not know that Malcolm was monitoring this. I thought we were home free to do whatever we want. So I'm going to have to probably go quick, or this can be a 40-minute episode itself. So any episode with Tandria Bellamy is one of my favorite episodes. Cindy Lago, when we were at, was it Flexport? We were at the Bank of America Center. Her busting chops about some brilliant thing she said. I think it was the something of one. What? Oh, Scott, it's in our sizzle reel, right? It's the lot of one, the shipment of one, whatever. It was all about customization in the supply chain. And I started writing it down, and she said, "What are you trademarking that?" Anytime we had real fun on the show, like when Kathy Morrow Robertson tells me to hush,
right?
And anytime, and when Tyson Steffens actually made talking about pallets interesting.
Yes,
I was absolutely enthralled by the discussion of pallets, and the realization I had come to was, having been in purchasing and in merchandising in retail, I didn't really care about the pallet. I said, I want that. You people in those dark rooms make that magic happen. But the pallet can lend to the quality and the speed of the shipment, all of those things. And now traceability.
Tyson's incredible. Check him out. Pallet Alliance. They're going to be making a repeat appearance soon.
Yeah, that's right.
He brings a lot beyond all the business insights and the things that you never would even think about when it comes to pallets and the right pallets, and you name it. The sense of humor Tyson brings that is part of the rewarding aspect of our journey. People like that. Okay.
Quotable quotes. Kevin Bell. It's Kevin Bell,
yep.
right?
AGG.
It's possible. I might get this wrong, so please correct me. But this is how I remember it. It's possible to take advantage of an opportunity without being opportunistic, and that was right at the start of the coronavirus pandemic, right? So timely, poignant, brilliant, subtle, and from the heart too. I mean, he didn't have that written down. He came up with that off the top of his head. So those kind of moments. Chris Barnes, when we were at a CSCMP local roundtable, when you could still do that, which seems like 100 years ago now.
Right.
We were sitting there talking about one of my favorite topics at the time, provenance. And Chris Barnes goes all the way back to Laugh-In, which was in reruns when we were all children, and also the Muppet Show,
right?
Provenance. Dun, 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 dun.
Provenance. Dun, dun, dun. That's good.
Where Chris comes up with this, and that's another reason that supply chain is not boring, is because Chris has such a rapier-like wit and ability. He's just so on it all the time. Everything he says, you better be looking for a laugh track on.
He's certainly one of the most observant individuals that
he is.
He doesn't miss much. He's like a hawk.
Yeah.
All right. So Greg, to your point, you and I can sit here and talk business for hours.
Come on, let's, man. Wait, let me hit a couple other things before you shut me down. Come on, boss. There's a couple things. Anytime it was Old Home Week. All right. So Mike Griswold, who I know from when he was our analyst at Blue Ridge and Curo when I was running companies back in the day, brilliant practitioner. We still meet with him about once a month. Diego Pantoja Navajas, anytime I get together with him, it's like Old Home Week. We were at Modex, and that show was gold. It was fun. It was fun for us because we were geeking out, right? It might not have been that interesting for anybody else. And any single time I am in the same room with Mike Mills, one of my co-founders at Blue Ridge, one of the remaining OGs at Blue Ridge, still with them and still making stuff happen. And I just love that guy. And every time we get together, it's like a mind meld. I mean, we can finish each other's sentences. So I just love any time that we're doing that.
Agreed. Yeah. It definitely, it felt, as an observer there, it felt like that. Well, Greg, as it was said earlier in this show, 400 down. Now we're on the journey to 800.
400 to go. Yeah.
But it's been, I'll tell you, if this next 400, if for that matter, if the next 40 or anything like what we've seen this first 400,
yep.
We better buckle up because it is really just such a, hey, look, we're the luckiest people in the world to have this job, this role, this responsibility of sitting down and hearing and learning from a wide plethora of different folks from across the world of global supply chain. And at a time, as you suggested, where it really is, it's got a seat, not at the kiddie table, as you put it, but at the real table and near the head of it.
Yeah.
Nothing happens without supply chain. And it'll be really interesting in the months and years ahead to see how the industry continues to evolve.
Yeah, I think so too. And there's so many people in this industry ready to step up. And that's what's so encouraging is, I don't want to say people have been waiting for a moment like this, but it seems like it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, again, Rick McDonald, Sandra McQuillan, people like this who've really had to perform at a high level and get their teams to perform at a high level. They have stepped up and made it happen. And if they didn't predict this, which nobody did on the entire planet, if they didn't predict this, they recovered really rapidly and they showed incredible grace and leadership in doing so. So
yep.
I know that all the leaders, I know that all the practitioners, I know that everyone driving a forklift like I did, pushing a hand cart like I did, stocking oil on the shelf like I did, right? I think running a register like I did, like many of us have done, all of those people on the front line, on the back line, never to be seen in some cases, but certainly impacting supply chain. Every one of those people is stepping up right now.
Yep.
And these 400 episodes are for those people.
Well put. And on that note, big thanks to you, Greg White, and buckle in. We're still just getting started, 400 episodes deep.
I know it. It's crazy, isn't it?
That's right. Hey, thanks, Greg.
Yep.
Can I say one thing?
Sure.
One last thing. There would be no Supply Chain Now without Scott Luton. So I think, these 400 episodes are a testament to the work that he does and, the passion that he puts into this organization, this podcast, this media group, everything that Supply Chain Now has morphed into. So I think the passion that we see in our guests is echoed by his passion and the passion that he has for Supply Chain Now. So, we're all here because you work hard and because we want to work hard for you. And we see your enthusiasm and we see what it can do and how it can impact the audience. And so I think it's, just want to mention that you're a big reason for what we do and for the impact that Supply Chain Now is making.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's Chris.
Because he will never say it himself.
Thanks for sharing, but it is about the listener. It's about the folks that come on and share their message and their story and their journey. And, I've got the best job in the world because, we collectively get a chance to facilitate that and share that. All right. So we got to close out. As much as I'd love to hear, I'd love to go back around the horn and hear more from each of y'all. You really, I can't tell you enough how special this is for me, and I'm sure for Amanda too, and what you do, and more importantly, what you're thinking and your perspective and your insights is so important. It fuels the business. It fuels what this journey we're on, and we can't thank y'all enough. To our audience, again, thanks for tuning in for this special 400th episode. As Chris and Amanda referenced, we're now it's the drive to 800, right? It's very special. Appreciate you tuning in. Find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. The challenge that we've been closing shows with, we're challenging ourselves with this as just as much as we're challenging our audience. But hey, do good, give forward, and be the change that's needed. And on that note, we'll see you next time on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.